I sure hope you weren't expecting any new games on the Nintendo Switch Online service, because we certainly didn't get any this week. The good news is that we still have a whole bunch of old school games to cover in this review crew series, including the 3 games we're going to be talking about today: The Legend of Zelda, Dr. Mario, and Gradius. Sure, all 3 of these games have been on Nintendo's subscription service for years now, but I'm still required to ask, are any of these games actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Ace, Nintendo, Power, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. So go and get ready to take on an entire alien army all by yourself, because this is another pill-poppin' episode of the Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew.
Watch Zelda become a legend on your Nintendo Entertainment System.
Zelda! After rocks!
Which way to go?
Good times! Peahens!
Levers!
Zelda!
The
Zelda!
Legend of Zelda. A never-ending adventure new for your Nintendo Entertainment System.
Zelda!
At a time when side-scrolling platformers and simple action games dominated the market, The Legend of Zelda stood above them all as a beacon of what was possible on the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was an epic adventure featuring a big map to explore, multiple dungeons to clear out, and imaginative enemies that were unlike anything else on Nintendo's 8-bit console. Sure, it's easy to look back now and see The Legend of Zelda as a no-brainer success, but that was definitely not the case in 1987 when it first hit store shelves in North America. Link not only had to save the Princess Zelda from the evil Ganon, but he also had to convince the world that it was worth going on the lengthy adventure in the first place. As is so often the case when it comes to games released in the mid-1980s, finding reviews can be a little tricky. The good news is the Computer and Video Games was there to review Zelda's UK release in 1988, and they absolutely loved it. Giving it a 9 out of 10, they gushed that there's an enormous country to examine, with 9 secret labyrinths to be located and examined, not to mention the overworld where you start your travels. The graphics and sound are excellent, and again, playability is supreme. It needs to be, as the price tag is a bit hefty at £39. Now, it probably won't surprise you that Nintendo Magazine System also loved The Legend of Zelda, giving it an 86%. Ace was even more impressed, using their ridiculous 1,000 point scale to give the game a score of 905. Golden cartridge and massive manual sorta make up for the hefty £40 price tag on this game. The control pad enables you to travel the extensive land and make icon selections to take part in this role-playing epic. Proof that consoles can be just as good at role-playing games as they are for arcade entertainment. If we fast forward to the year 2003, we'll see the magazine GMR review The Legend of Zelda in their very first issue. They gave it a 7 out of 10, noting that at the time when generic platformers and disposable shooters ruled the shelves, along came this huge adventure so deep, so complex, you actually had to gasp, save your game progress. Zelda contains so many extras and secrets that you couldn't go to recess anywhere in America without overhearing kids trading information in the schoolyard. The gameplay was simple, but set the template for every Zelda game to date. With the only so-so low score coming from a review published 15 years later, I think it's fair to say that critics loved The Legend of Zelda. It was a big deal, and the reviews reflect its importance. Little did they know that it would spawn dozens of top-rated games and still be going strong in 2023. But I do think that every single one of them knew that Link and Zelda were here to stay. Obviously, you should play The Legend of Zelda, but I have a hunch that you already have. While the shoot-'em-up genre really flourished on the 16-bit platforms, that's not to say that there weren't a few great 8-bit shooters back in the day. One of the best was Gradius, Konami's flagship shoot-'em-up series that lasted well into the 21st century before it ended up running out of gas. While it's certainly not the most fast-paced or exciting game on the market, this 1986 original proved that the genre could be done well on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Gradius is a short and sweet action game with moai heads, a unique upgrade system, and of course the Vic Viper, one of the most iconic spacecrafts to ever hit the video game screen. Genre fans look back at the original Gradius with nostalgia, but what did critics say back in the mid-1980s? Well, when it came to the games machine, they were a little disappointed with the port. Giving it a 76%, they concluded that in the arcade, Nemesis was the classic arcade shoot-'em-up, and the Nintendo conversion is a little different in terms of gameplay. Undermined slightly by less than perfect graphics, a twee soundtrack, and strange loss of speed in level 5, this is still a good blast. In the transition to console, Gradius has lost little of its former glory. That's a surprisingly low score compared to the rest of the reviews, all of which fall in the 9 out of 10 range. For example, Ace used their ridiculous 1,000 point scale to give Gradius a score of 890, while Nintendo Magazine System rounded things off with a 90%. That's the same score we saw from Computer and Video Games, who said, high-quality conversion of the classic horizontally scrolling arcade game Nemesis incorporates all of the features of the original coin-op and adds some secret bonuses. The graphics and sound are excellent, and the shoot-'em-up action is fast and furious. Look, as a shooter on the Nintendo Entertainment System, there is no question that Gradius is one of the best. Sure, it's slow and simple when compared to the 16-bit shoot-'em-ups. But pretty much everything that made this game great in the 1980s is still fun today. Now, what can we do about getting the rest of the Gradius games on the Switch? No, really, that's a serious question.
あのグラディウスがファミコンソフトになった。未知との戦いは今始まった。全宇宙を飲み込んだ超スペースファイターグラディウス。Konami.
After seeing the success of Tetris, you can't really blame Nintendo for wanting to go back to the well and fish out another puzzle game. At the same time, the company was still a little wary of the genre, worried that maybe everybody's obsession with falling blocks was just a fad. The result was Dr. Mario, a puzzle game that used a popular Nintendo character to sell people on the simple concept. Something that they would continue to do time and time and time again. Instead of clearing lines with falling shapes, the goal here was to match colors using falling pill capsules. See? Totally different! Now, in order to properly tell the story of the reviews, we're gonna have to look at both the Nintendo Entertainment System and Game Boy versions, which were basically the same game and received almost identical scores. Seeing as this is one of those beloved classics that a lot of people have nostalgia for, let's go ahead and start with the high scores. This includes Mean Machines, who ended up giving Dr. Mario a score of 88% in their 5th issue. Julian liked this game even more than Columns, which he called ridiculously easy. Dr. Mario is even better, what with dealing with all the germs as well as creating the columns. When you first start playing, clearing the screen of germs is quite a tall order. But once you've got the hang of it, there's a ton to keep you glued, like creating cunning multiples, for example. Dr. Mario is a mega addictive game that certainly deserves a place in any NES owner's collection. Although, if you're after a single puzzle game to keep you occupied, Tetris still rules. As it turns out, most of the British press agreed with Mean Machines, with Nintendo Magazine System giving Dr. Mario a score of 88%. With a score of 81%, Rays also liked the game, though once again they recommended people buy Tetris instead. Two-player games on the Boy are always fun, but people with a UK Game Boy will already have Tetris, the original and still best puzzle game. From here, the scores take a bit of a hit. For example, Nintendo Power may have plastered Dr. Mario all over their cover, but they couldn't seem to muster a score higher than 3.9 out of 5. Ace, on the other hand, kinda hated the game, arguing that it reeks of plagiarism, which wouldn't be so bad if only it was better than the original games it's modeled on. They concluded that it's a simple game idea and not one that works particularly well, I hasten to add. What you have here is Nintendo's favorite game character playing Nintendo's favorite game, and sadly, it just doesn't come close to either. And then there's Electronic Gaming Monthly, whose editors had real mixed feelings about the pill-pushing doctor. Martin gave the game a 6 out of 10, noting that Dr. Mario was Nintendo's attempt to clone columns for the Game Boy, and soon the NES. Not only do you have to twirl pills into position a la Tetris, but you must also place them in rows to successfully eliminate the viruses. It's complicated in higher levels, but it is different. Steve, on the other hand, wasn't having any of that, giving it a 4 out of 10 and saying, Dr. Mario is an annoyingly over-involved version of Tetris meets columns that takes a different approach and comes up way short. Sure, Nintendo has done the same old thing in a refreshing new way, but where's the fun? EGM gave Dr. Mario an average score of 5.75 out of 10. Look, no matter how good or bad the scores were, one thing was painfully clear. Everybody agreed that Tetris is a better game than Dr. Mario. And for a lot of the critics, it wasn't even close. I get it, I know it makes me unpopular, but I find myself agreeing a lot more with EGM and Ace than the other critics. I've always felt that Dr. Mario was a huge step down from Tetris. But hey, for those who love the game and still have a lot of nostalgia for it, I'm happy it's available on the Nintendo Switch. It's all yours.
Killer game from Nintendo. Dr. Mario, wow. But it ain't what you think. You get to zap these viruses. And with 2 players, you can actually trash the other guy. Remember, kids, try this at home. Hey, you can get it for Game Boy, too.
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post a new episode every single time Nintendo adds a classic game to their online service. Now, here's the question I have for you. Dr. Mario, yay or nay? Look, I suspect you already know that I'm on the nay side, and maybe I'm alone here. I mean, I love Tetris, it's one of my favorite games of all time. I could just never get into Dr. Mario. Let me see your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, okay look, I know this is the 4th review crew episode in a row. I normally try to mix things up a lot more, but I've had a busy schedule and things just lined up like this. The good news is that we'll be back next week with more reviews and a whole lot more. That said, look for a new episode of Limited Run Games Review Crew on Tuesday. Guys, it's not my fault. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,